Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror, movies, and awesomeness. This week we kick off a retrospective on films that showed us the horror inherent in replacing love with technology, and we're starting with the mother of them all, the 1975 film, The Stepford Wives. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. With me from Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, writer for Rockabilly Online, creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
Hello. True.
And finally, also in Austin, that's not finally, I shouldn't have said finally. I don't know
wait a minute, you're leaving out several of them.
Also in Austin.
This is why we need to replace you with a robot, Jason.
Yes. Also in Austin, Jamie
One
Barr,
that makes coffee.
musician, pinup model, educator, lead vocalist, and upright bassist for Austin's premier all-female rock and roll band, Danger Cakes. You can find out about their latest shows and their album Quarter Life Crisis at dangercakes.net. Jamie Barr, say hello.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be
Los
back.
Angeles, thank you. From Los Angeles, Adam Foshko, screenwriter for the new Skylanders Superchargers, story consultant for Destiny the Taken King, writer and creative producer for Call of Duty Advanced Warfare Exo Zombies. I always love reading that. Say hello, Mr. Adam.
Hello.
Hello. And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Joya Guzman. Say hello.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir. Okay, according to Wikipedia, and the way we're going to do this, I'm going to do this plot thing, and then we're just going to get into this movie because, my God, what a movie. According to Wikipedia, The Stepford Wives is a 1975 American sci-fi horror thriller based on the 1972 Ira Levin novel of the same name. It was directed by Brian Forbes with a screenplay from William Goldman.
Awesome.
The guy who brought us The Princess Bride, The Sting,
Butch Cassidy.
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It's hard to think of a major film in the 70s that wasn't written by William.
Well, according to the director, he was a total jerk to work with, but according to him, the director rewrote everything.
That's funny.
Well, they had an uncredited ghostwrite repolished by Brian De Palma, and Goldman was very upset.
No kidding.
About that.
Brian De Palma?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't get that one.
No kidding.
The Brian De Palma. Yeah, we watched Jamie and I
Brian
watched
De Palma
the
was
documentary.
he was originally going to direct it, but then he didn't for whatever reason.
It stars Catherine Ross, Paula Prentice, my love, Peter Masterson, Nanette Newman, and the lovely Ginger, Tina Louise. While the film was a moderate success at the time of the release, it has grown in stature as a cult film over the years, building upon the reputation of the novel. The term Stepford, or Stepford Wives, has become a popular science fiction concept, and several sequels were shot, as well as a remake in 2004 using the same title, and that one was more of a comedy. But this is the original, which is not a comedy, and it's a delight. So let's get our opening thoughts. We got a big group today, so I'll keep mine to a real minimum, and you should probably try to keep yours to a minute or so that we can plow into the actual discussion. But nevertheless, I want to hear your thoughts about the film and how you first came to it. Let's go Jamie, Adam, Joya, Drew, and then I'll say anything if there's anything left. Jamie, welcome back. So happy to have you back. And
Thank you.
Tell us why you have graced us with your presence for The Stepford Wives.
I actually really like this movie. This is the first time I've ever seen it. I saw the remake of with Nicole Kidman and Bette Midler and Mr. Ferris Bueller himself. Oh God, now I can't think of his name. But anyways, Matthew Broderick. Yes. But it was, it was all right. It was cheesy. I liked the aesthetic, but this was a great piece of feminist history, and obviously it's not an actual history, but just a satire on. Well, satire is not the right word, but anyways,
sure.
Very.
No, you can call it that. There's some of that.
It is, and I just felt as a feminist, as somebody who doesn't always fit into the ideals of what some people think of feminism, I find this movie to be really interesting and introspective in not just for what it stands for then, but what society is today, and how my place as a woman fits into it. And I just move on and let everybody else have their say. But I think it's a really great movie to watch.
Wow, outstanding. Adam, the Stepford Wives, what are your thoughts?
This is really a great movie, and I think more importantly, I think it's if you look at it through the prism of the 1970s, I think it's a real slice of history, all the way, from the book written by Ira Levin, which, he also wrote, Death Trap, which, was very sort of darkly satirical when it talks about writing and the creative process and murder. But it's, with a Bill Goldman script, who I think also had a taste for, certainly for dialogue, storytelling, and for satire. When you see the film with the fashions, with the style, with what everybody's sort of wearing, and the notion, I think Jamie put it really well. It is an interesting film, particularly with all the, with the notion of feminism that began to really rise up and gain in popularity. We take for granted more now, I think, than in the 1970s, where women's lib actually became a term that was coined and used. It's interesting to see this film in the face of that, and I think it's definitely a slice of the time. And I think there are probably some strains of it that can be echoed today, but it's a film of a different pace, of course. But I think it says some very important things, and it definitely paints in very, very broad strokes. The notion of gender roles, and particularly how boorish men can be, to the point of even replacing women who have of thoughts and voices of their own with animatronic or cyborg creations, doppelgangers. So it's definitely an interesting film, and even though it's been replicated at various times, I think this one is still by far the best.
Very cool, very cool. Julia, Stepford Wives, have you seen this before?
Yeah, I'm the one who actually suggested that we do it, and I've been wanting to do it for a while because I remembered loving it so much and finding it so interesting, even though it's not the traditional horror movie. But of course, we've gotten off of our traditional horror movie track a lot of times. So I appreciate you guys indulging me on this series. I love it a lot. I think it's really interesting for the reasons that Jamie and Adam have articulated, as well as the fact that, to me, this time watching it, I really saw another level to it. I saw another just kind of a whole different perspective, I guess, in that I don't necessarily think that these men have all really bought into this idea. I think almost that they're being, and maybe this is my having watched Jessica Jones, I have like the Kilgrave on the mind, but I feel like they've brainwashed by this cult leader, basically. That's the Disney, the former Disney, animatronic maker. Because I really believe this is his utopia. He's created this universe that's perfect for him. And I think, if I were to guess what's happening behind the scenes, that these men walk in to this men's club thing and they go, oh, this is interesting. And they say, okay, well, if you want to be a part of our special fancy club, there's some rules. But once we tell you the rules, you have to commit now, because once you know it, you have to join. And because you can't not join and then I think once they know, they're told now this is how it's going to be for you, because otherwise you both die, because you can't know our secret and leave. So I have a feeling that there's some threatening, some brainwashing, and some mind control going on behind the scenes. And I don't think it's as simple as all these guys are suddenly just like, oh yeah, great idea, have a robot wife. That's awesome. I think there's a lot of, because you see some of the torture that both our main character's husband as well as Tina Louise's husband, they seem to go through kind of a lot of angst about the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So, I'm excited to talk about this movie. I've been super excited to talk about it.
Wow. Drew?
I think this is a fascinating movie, and I think, it almost has more to say now. I think, obviously it had a lot to say back in the 70s, and I think if you were just to watch this as a straight, sci-fi horror movie, you can watch it like that because it does play out a lot like Rosemary's Baby, and of course, it's the novel is written by the same author, so of course it's going to have that feel to it. But watching it this time, I hadn't seen this movie in years. In fact, I had seen the remake more recently than I'd seen this. I was really struck on how much this made me think about the, women's lib, obviously, but the sort of counter reaction we have now with the men's movement, where you have all these wingnut, angry guys like humming and hoeing and hawing that they don't have a nice little housewife to come home to like they were promised on TV and reruns and such. And so like the notion of the angry American male, I think, is even more a topic of discussion today. Maybe I wasn't of age in the 70s, so obviously I can't remember if it was a hot button as it is now. But this to me is what I took away from it this time with this viewing. I mean, there's other observations, but I will save that for when we get into the meat of this very, very interesting film. Okay.
Thank you very much, and I really have nothing to add. I think we're going to get to it. I instead of going through the plot as we normally do, we've got a lot of guys and a lot of ideas, and so I thought let's go straight into before we even touch on the practical aspects of this plot. And by the way, I guess I should give like a 20-second version of the plot. This small family, Catherine Ross, who is the lovely Catherine Ross, who is a sort of amateur photographer, she moves with her husband to this small town, and no sooner have they moved than the husband takes up with this mysterious...
Her husband, who is played by Mary Stuart Masterson's father, and Mary Stuart Masterson is actually one of the children.
Yeah, he's actually...
I was right!
Yeah,
I saw it,
I was like, is that Mary Stuart Masterson? And I looked it up, and I was like, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No sooner have they moved in than he joins this men's club that Joya mentions, and the plot of the film is how Catherine Ross and her new friend Paula Prentice begin investigating, like a couple of Nancy Drews, what exactly is going on to make the local housewives so nutty as their friends slowly disappear and the horrible conclusion finally occurs. So. To begin with, I think I want to dive deeper into this question, and I think Jamie and Julia should start with it. But Betty Friedan didn't like this movie. She probably didn't watch it. But Betty Friedan, the author of The Feminine Mystique, who wrote all about the emptiness of housewives' lives and how they were wasting their lives, making it harder and harder to spend all day baking and doing all this crap. She didn't like this movie because she believed, I think without seeing it, that it was more a fantasy, like it was about men being able to replace wives, and it was some sort of misogynist thing. But what do you think this film has to say about women's place in the home as to what they're supposed to be doing? Do you want to talk about that a little bit,
Jamie?
I feel like that it isn't as much of a say of what they're supposed to be doing as to how things were done versus the way they should be. The Stepford wives themselves, women who had already been there, you find out that they were all past feminists. They're all women who were starting to, tear down the walls of sexism in their own small town, and instead of just, go along with the husbands see their wives as equals, they come up with this, horrible way to keep them barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, basically. Well, I say pregnant, but we haven't figured out the anatomy of the actual Stepford wives, since they don't draw blood. They don't bleed. But
well, no,
I do feel
we can't have children anymore at that point.
I love so many of the aspects of the metaphors that they have. Obviously in the beginning when there's a man carrying the mannequin across the street and, with a bag over its head. And, it's just a naked mannequin. And, the kids say, like, Daddy, I just saw a man carrying a naked woman. And he says, that's why we're leaving. We're moving to Stepford. But I find it interesting that the parallel between the main woman's photography, her thing that keeps, her individual self whole, that has nothing to do with her children or her husband. It's something that she does solely for herself. It's her passion. And how throughout the movie that is displayed in different ways, where, that feminism, like that photography that she's always witnessing, seems to have very feminist themes and whatnot. So, I mean, that one right there, I mean, the fact that the mannequin's blindfolded, or has its face covers, and it's just a nameless woman being carried by a man who knows where he's going. He knows what he's going to do with it. And, and then later on, when she goes to the art gallery, the pictures she takes are boys playing in a pool, hosing each other down. And I was like, wow. Not only is the one kid like hosing the rest, showing that the one guy was the alpha male, who in my opinion, he obviously was Diz, was like the big bad wolf of the pack. But the rest of the boys are in the pool, like together. Yeah, they're exactly. Not even just training for it to be early. It's more like the actual. I feel like the pack mentality, the alpha male versus all the rest, who then become either submissive, or they fall into trying to be one of the herd and follow the example of the alpha.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't even think about that. I just thought it was I thought it was just the joyful children. Because notice that, regardless of what happens in Stepford Children, we just in this movie we see how the kids are so lifeless at the beginning with their uniforms and just kind of stare at the other kids. And so to me, it was just taking a picture of these children who are having so much joy and fun and being carefree, versus this like controlled, like you need to be seen and not heard, and you need to look nice, and my kids need to be put together and all this. So I just saw it as that. It never occurred to me that it was about the indoctrination of the boys.
So what did you think, though, about going back to the role that women are supposed to fulfill?
Right. Well, so what I'm thinking is, as Amy's talking, is about, just kind of like looking at the 3 decades prior to this one, to the 70s. We had the war, and so all the women started doing the men's jobs, and as everybody knows, the men are gone, and so then they come back, and the women are like, oh, so now we're supposed to just go back to the kitchen. And they're like, yeah, we're going to make it worth your while, because we're going to give you, nice washing machines and whatever. And so, it's going to be better than it was before in the Depression. So now we've got this whole thing where, again, you're seeing, the TV, like somebody mentioned about how you have you're right, I think it was Drew, that you have this image that you've seen on TV of how things are supposed to be. And then you get to the 60s and this sexual revolution and all this free love and the pill and everything, and it's like, wait, what happened to that 50s fantasy that we had going? Like, we liked that. And so I think that's where those feminists that have been since disposed of in that town popped up. I think they're probably from the 60s, and they were like, we're going to, we're going to take over. We're going to show that we don't belong in the kitchen, like Jimmy's saying, and that we can do our own thing and we can be intelligent. And so somebody somewhere, probably Diz, gets the idea that, well, no, we're not having that. And my favorite line in the movie is when she says, Joanna says to Diz, but why? And he goes, because we can. And I have thought that line so many times when people have just done, horrible, greedy, evil things. I've been like, God, why do they do that? And they're like, because they can. It's just power corrupts, and he had that ability, and he's like, we don't want this life we want the fantasy. We want the what's her name, Mrs. Cleaver, whatever her name was. June Cleaver. We want June Cleaver. We don't want our feminist you know, like
they want the Madonna whore.
There's that whole, apparently women are also supposed to satisfy you sexually and be amazed by you sexually.
Yeah.
And that's part of the thing that these robots are programmed to do. And the first thing that happens when they get to this little town, guys, I'm sure that you noticed this as well. First thing that happens is the husband is being really horny, which is funny. You know, there's this sort of, and he's irritating. He's irritating to the wife, you know, when he's like, you know, we should have sex in every room. He's being really crass. It was kind of funny. I thought, what is going on? And all of a sudden he's sort of like asserting his sexuality in ways.
Well, that made me wonder how long he knew. You know, like if he knew this going into it.
I had the same thought because he says to the guy across the street, who presumably would never have met before now, he said she cooks as good as she looks, whatever the guy's name is. So it really seemed like they had already kind of had these conversations previously.
True.
I mean, I think you know, it's purposely vague. I mean, you know, obviously they keep a lot of stuff about this vague, so you can sort of, you know, intellectualize and fill in your own blanks. And, you know, we obviously, from the discussion we're already having, a lot of people have walked away from this with different ideas. But, you know, the fact that he is being so sort of sexually aggressive towards her, and there's a fetishistic line throughout this whole movie that I find very fascinating. Even Diz has the line where he says, "I like watching women doing little domestic chores," which he says in a very, very voyeuristic way. And so there is, you know, I don't think that this is an anti-feminist movie. I do think that there is that titillation there, whether you want consciously or subconsciously. I mean, there's even a line at the end where Diz says, "Oh, well, let's put the shoe on the other foot. Wouldn't you want some hunk waiting on you?" I'm paraphrasing, but waiting on you hand and foot. Like, there is this idea that, you know, well, of course, wouldn't you want a personal chef / maid / sex slave?
If you had the power. I'm saying basically, if you had the power to overpower us and replace us, wouldn't you do it? Wouldn't you do it in a second? I mean, he just assumes that there's just
there's almost like this movie's almost like a moral Rorschach test, because, you know, like you know, what would you do? Like, what would you do?
I think the fantasy of what people would do is very different from what you would feel about it afterwards, because you can think, and this is the case with any fantasy, you can think, gosh, it sure would be nice to be whatever, you know, to have $1 billion. It sure would be nice to have a bunch of servants. It sure would be nice to be, like, gorgeous and have everybody fall in love with you. But if really in real life this happens to you, there's this huge host of problems that may not make that a life that you would enjoy. Somebody might enjoy it, but you might not. You might be like, oh, God, I hate the idea that everybody's looking at me all the time and wanting to have sex with me. I hate the idea, you know. So, wait, go ahead.
One of the things that Jamie said, and I never would have taken away from this, and, you know, she can chime in about this.
I don't get to actually say it. Yeah.
Well, no. I want you. Never mind. I will shut up, because I will shut up and I will let you veer into this. No, I want you to say it.
Well, I was talking about the way. Well, I think it's interesting how, like, I consider, and I'm sure you do too, Julia, like, consider yourself to be a feminist. I like to think of myself, and I don't even like the word feminist, because I think it's sexist, because it's implying that in order for someone to think that, you know, the genders are equal, like, you have to be feminist. Like, you have to associate with the female perspective. And it's like, no, that doesn't actually make sense. So, like, I would, you know, not to get caught up in semantics, but I thought, you know, there was a lot of bralessness in this movie, you know, and during that time, people thought of, you know, the, like, oh, I'm liberated, I'm going to go, you know, burn my bra. Like, that was this, you know, era. And then the women who end up wearing all these clothes, who are dressed for their husbands, they have a lot of neck, high collars and, very form-fitting clothes, everything's like the bra is the enemy, it's like, oh, look, this bra is a push-up bra and, I'm wearing makeup and, in the way that this purveys feminism or traits feminism, I feel like they're saying Joanne and Bobby's, viewpoints of, well, you can't be wearing makeup. You can't wear a bra most of the time. Like, I understand wanting to have your own things outside of the workplace or outside of the home, your own interests and your own sense of self. But we insist that your sense of self should be this way. Like, oh, natural. And
do you think there's a snobbishness to the way Catherine Ross and Paula Prentice are with their sort of hippie clothes and their and
the feminists of that era, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I was saying, because I think, not that I, like I said earlier, I do enjoy the remake of this movie because of the fashion, has that whole 50s kind of appeal. So I like that look, but I don't dress that way or do that for someone else. I do that because I like that, and I feel like it makes you feel like, well, am I not as good of a feminist because, I'm actually, whether it's conscious or not, I'm subjugating myself to the desires of what I think men would like. And it's like, that's, in my opinion, that's not the right way feminism should be approached.
Well, and somebody finds everything attractive, right? I mean, in theory, there are people who really find the hippie look attractive. I should mention,
it's not. And I'm not saying that it's not attractive. I'm saying the fact that they're saying, like, oh, you suddenly put on a push-up bra, you can't possibly be a feminist. The other things that she does, the housework, all that stuff, like, oh my God, your house is sparkling, like, you must be a Stepford wife now. Yes, she was, but,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's another school of feminism that says that women should dress for men because to use their feminine wiles to control men, and that you should use
I
what
think
God
that's
gives
wrong
you
too.
Yeah, no, I'm just telling you that it could go either way as far as that goes. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, that if we're encouraging women to be themselves, to be empowered, then they should be empowered to be who they want to be and not any particular, which is, I mean, that's the case with anything establishment. It's the idea that, oh, you can, be yourself as long as you're yourself within this particular fashion construct or within this particular mainstream, cultural, whatever. Yeah.
Can I throw out a point, though, go ahead.
Well, I just want to know that we've just not conclusively established that you can crush the patriarchy while wearing a push-up bra.
Yeah.
The debate is over.
Well done, everyone. I mean, Betty. You know what? Let's set aside Betty Friedan for now. What I wanted to mention was there's still a movie that they have to make, and to some extent, what's going on is they've chosen what they think a good wife is going to look like, just as a visual shorthand in the film. And it was interesting. They had two ways to go, because Goldman originally envisioned that all of the wives would become more sexy instead of less. They ended up going with the solution where all the wives, once they're transformed, become very demure and wear high necks and are only sexy alone with their men. But as originally envisioned, they'd be bouncing around. They'd look like Playboy bunnies. They'd wear bathing suits all the time and stuff. And they ended up going the way they did, mainly because they picked one actress as Miss Van Zandt and they patterned off all the rest of the looks of the other actresses after hers. But it was totally random. They literally could have gone either way. I don't really have a conclusion on that.
It should be said that even though they are demure looking and almost quasi Victorian, they are still beautiful.
Oh yes, indeed. Because it's a look that's intended to appeal, that's been chosen carefully by the men involved. It's not it's not something that is springing from them as something that they enjoy. It's a bunch of men have programmed. We think the wives in Stepford will look like this. By the way, speaking of the clothing and everything worn by Catherine Ross and Paula Prentice, I love these two girls. I mean, aren't they fantastic?
I called that.
What?
Wow.
You called what?
When we were watching this, I was like, I bet you Jason has a big old 1970s the heart throb go like mad on for the clothes that these two chicks are wearing.
Yes. Absolutely.
Was it the short overalls and the long sleeve wide collars?
When Paula Prentice wears short overalls, it's so funny because her legs appear to be like 9 feet long, and it's she's a very tall girl, and I've loved Paula Prentice ever since Where the Boys Are, and she's so good here. But it's not really just their look. I love this relationship. I mean, the central romance, and it's not a sexual romance, but the central romance of this movie is the sort of wonderful Rosolian Isles kind of detective relationship.
Well, and the actresses actually became such good friends that Catherine Ross couldn't bring herself to stab
Paula Prentice
in that scene, and so the director ended up shaving his own hand and doing it himself.
That is so funny. Yeah.
But yeah, it is. It's a sweet relationship, and they're definitely a team, and they're in it together, and so it is devastating. It's devastating when Paula Prentice is gone, and so I mean, to kind of fill out the plot a little bit here, it's not that they disappear; it's that these women are one way, or they have personality, and we actually come in. This happens to them within the first few months of them living there. So we come in and it's just Catherine Ross, and she doesn't really. All the other women are just these plastic women, and then Paula Prentice, springs through a field toward her. Speaking of your romance thing, I mean, she literally is running through a field toward her and says, "Oh my God, it's so great to meet you. I'm new here too." And she's like, "Oh, somebody with personality,
Yeah.
And then the two of them go and see Tina Louise, Ginger from Gilligan's Island, and she also has personality, and she likes to play tennis, and it's like the three of them. And then Tina Louise suddenly becomes one of these women after a weekend of supposedly, just a beautiful weekend with her husband after she's been miserable with him and kind of hates him. And so now you see that one, and that's when you realize, oh, so these women didn't start out this way. They just became this way overnight, literally. And then when it happens to Paula Prentice, it's just like, oh, crap. It's like,
it's the water! It's the water.
Oh, yeah. What could it be? That's right. She has a theory. Paula Prentice has a theory.
About El
Paso. Yes. Paula Prentice is from, Houston or Dallas or something like that. I mean, she's a Texas girl, I think. And, she's obsessed with the notion that maybe they've just got water that's turning them into zombies. What did you think about this notion, and I want to know, Adam, you've been married a long time. I've been married a long time. This whole thing about killing your wife's hobbies, I just thought was one of the most interesting aspects of this. And Drew and Jamie, I don't remember how long you guys have been married, but I know it's several years, but not a decade yet.
No, we're only 4 years, so.
Well, how lovely those, huh?
Yeah.
But this whole thing of Tina Louise, they meet Tina Louise, who becomes their sort of third confidant, and Tina Louise's big thing is that she's a tennis player. You'd think that husbands would be interested in their wives being tennis players, but in the context of this film, the point is that it's something that the wife has for herself. It's her thing. And all of those things get stamped out.
Not only does he not like it, but he wants a swimming pool.
He wants something else. He wants a swimming pool.
Well, it's her individuality. It's her expression, something she does for herself. And it's a source of control because anything that she does away from the house and away from him is something that focuses away from from him. So it sounds like something that everyone.
And he does say he's not good at tennis, too. That's the other thing. Like, she beats him.
Did he say that? Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So there you go.
That all sort of makes sense. It just continues to go to reinforce. I mean, these men are painted in very kind of very broad, boorish, chauvinistic, but very base strokes. Some of them, though, what's interesting is there are a number of them who are enormously weak, and I think this kind of goes with, what I heard earlier about perhaps they fall under the control or the dominance of this sort of like this cult leader in a sense.
Of Disney.
Because these are some very weak.
Because he works for Disney.
And that's subtle, isn't it?
They say it and all those animatronics. That's what I can only think of, like the Pirates. It's a Small World and Pirates of the Caribbean, the Disney rides. Where people that's what I kept thinking. That's what they were turned into.
And you're supposed to think that, absolutely.
Yeah, because he worked. They said that he worked for Disney.
Right. That's why they called him Diz.
But I liked her comeback though, which was great. Which is, you don't seem like it is because you would never. You don't look like somebody who likes to make anyone else happy.
Yeah.
Well, there were a lot of
the weakness of the men is interesting because the husband is kind of a buffoon. He does seem he seems like he's kind of married out of his league because he's not like the best looking guy.
He stole the girl from Mrs. Robinson from The Graduate.
Yeah. And he's but what is interesting is as broadly as these guys are, because and Julia already touched on this, they do show them having pangs of remorse at times about what they are doing, which is...
Well, and also what's interesting is, even at the end, not to give away the end, what's interesting is that, it's not as if her husband kills her.
Yeah.
It's left in the hands of, which actually, I mean, what's interesting is the artificially created instrument of man's desire is the thing that kills the natural woman or the woman with a voice and her own personality, as opposed to...
The women are doing themselves in.
Right, and it's not as if the men are, Diz may witness it. I think maybe he's around, at that point. But I think what's interesting is that the men, are they evil? They're certainly weak. They certainly by going along with this are terrible and evil and guilty. But what's interesting is that they don't have the spine to even carry that through. They have they have the big mouths. They have the out of their weakness, which is really the sense of chauvinism anyway. It comes from male inadequacy that really adds fuel to this fire of having a need somehow to dominate and to sort of take away, the whole notion
that earlier. But also to have somebody to take care of you.
Right.
Well, I think Diz is actually supposed to be... I think Diz is supposed to represent society. I mean, even the fact that it's Disney, it's what we've been told to kind of swallow since we were children, the way and the ideals of society. And that he thinks he's the authority, then the other men have put him into that position. So, and where they talk about the men not feeling able to stand up for themselves, that's how, I know Drew talks about feeling that way sometimes when he talks about lacking girls who are thick. It's the same type of thing.
Oh, it totally is.
Feeling different and feeling, like almost where you come off as like having, if you were to like someone out of your societal norms, you come off as either a pervert or a fetishist or something along those lines. Where, like I was saying before, though, with equality between, that just means everyone can care about whomever they want. They can find whatever they find attractive, and it's not Disney or Diz or society leading them.
But
the struggle.
Interesting.
But I have this question though. Like I I keep being of two minds with this movie because I guess more than that. But one of them is the notion that, yes, that Stepford is society, that Diz is society, that this teaching is something about it. But there's also this notion that Stepford represents an impotent, although Catherine Ross loses, spoiler, I'm sorry, but an impotent escape from society. In other words, like back in New York, that's where things are happening. That's where women are selling photographs, and that's where wives dress differently, and where people have their own interests, and society's marching forward in progressivism. And so if you move out to the suburbs, that's where you can create a society that forgets what's going on out in the real world. But it requires damage. It requires doing damage to yourself and to your family members.
I just don't believe for a second that these guys are happy with these women. I mean, I think that, like I say, that they've become part of this cult situation, and I think this guy has decided that he needs for these people to be focused on their work or focused on whatever, like
you don't
whatever
think they're
it is.
Happy?
Oh, I don't think they're happy at all.
So tell me this though. You've mentioned before. You said, Julia, you've said you've been in many situations where you go into a room where you're seated with a whole bunch of wives, and you try to engage them in conversations about the Huffington Post, and the conversation goes something like what happens in this movie.
Yeah, I've had occasion throughout my life to be around upper class people, and what ends up happening is that kind of the opposite of what happens with our household and our friends is that the women end up, well, actually they don't ever end up in the kitchen because there's like servants in the kitchen, but they end up, kind of in the parlor or whatever, and then the men are at some other, like maybe a study or something, and they separate, they gender separate, and the women talk about the help, and literally they talk about, like, it's hard to get good help. I mean, this still happens. And they talk about the children some, a little bit. They talk about clothing a lot, and like stylists, and maybe the gym or the tennis club, whatever it is that they go to. And when I've been around these conversations, I'm just crawling out of my skin, and I've often gone and spent some time with the men who are talking about business, and I'm like, well, I'm not that interested in this, but it's way more interesting than what the women are talking about, and it's just so bizarre. But what I'm saying about this in this case is that so yeah, I guess you're right that some men may be happy with these these wives that are kind of trophy wives and just supporting their career, but I think a lot of men aren't that way, because in the same group, in the same culture, in the same society I'm talking about, there's also the women who are like me who don't fit into that model, and they have men who adore them too. Yeah. So I think there probably are some of the men who are like, oh, it's so nice, especially the dumber ones who just feel like they need to have somebody that's even dumber than them just to feel better about themselves. But I think the intelligent ones who are able and willing to be challenged are going to be bored, to tears with these women. And I really wonder, and we're talking about the practical part now of like what would this universe look like. I really wonder how many of these guys would go out as a town to find somebody interesting to talk to, a woman, or something. I don't know, but it's it's interesting.
What's interesting, in addition to the, I think what we're making of it, which I think these ideas are very much alive in the book and in this movie, and on a, I won't say on a lighter side, but there's another thing that's being, I think, another theme at work as well, and that is that Ira Levin, was a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker, and there was this notion about, particularly in the 60s and 70s, about people moving out to the suburbs, and there's a whole thing about the banality of suburban life. And I think that's I think that maybe I don't know exactly how this started, but it's before it became a much larger thing and became about other issues, I think that are I think more largely drawn that we're talking about tonight. I think part of it also just may have been also a reaction to this notion of moving out of the suburbs, and just the homogeny and the sameness and the banality of and the sheer boredom of these people who kind of move out there through the eyes of a New Yorker who this is why you live here, because this is where people really live. What the hell's going on out there? People are talking about clothes and kids and shopping and whatever, and you know.
And I'm so busy with all my baking.
They're all like robots, and you go, oh, great idea for a book, and then it just kind of goes on from
there. Yeah. No, I guess you're right. It never occurred to me that another thing at work in this film is just simply city life snobbishness. You know, and that can give you cause to understand where.
Well, how many 70s horror films occur because city people are looking suspiciously at people who live outside of the city? I mean, that's a running thing throughout the entire decade.
Hell yeah! I mean, we talked about that's Let's Scare Jessica to Death. That's Burnt Offerings. That's we've done a number. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Chainsaw, you know, all these movies where city folk who should know better wander into the society of country folk and come to regret it. And
this is just the northeastern version.
Yeah. I think that's right. You know, this is where these people have escaped, and they've made a world that is of their own design because they don't like being around whatever it is that they're getting away from in this city.
I want to say something. I think Julie is giving a lot of men too much credit.
Go ahead.
I think there are a lot of men out there, and I'm not saying all, obviously, because I couldn't be with somebody that didn't challenge me intellectually. I would be the guy that would be leaving Stepford to go out and find somebody I could talk about music or books or whatever with. But there are a lot of men who probably would be perfectly happy with a docile Stepford wife, and I overhear people every day, and I hear things like this coming out of some people's mouths. As disheartening.
I agree, but don't we use the term now Stepford wife as a negative as a negative connotation?
Mostly,
in conversation now.
Mostly,
we've come to recognize, this thing as being ugly and dangerous, and clearly anathema. And it came from it's this sort of work where you go, I mean, do we really? I mean, a lot of guys do a lot of things, but in general, as a society, I think the guys that would want a Stepford wife wouldn't know to call it a Stepford wife.
Right. Well, they call them trophy wives.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
whatever. They say, I want somebody beautiful who's not going to give me a lot of trouble, who's not going to give me a lot of lip, or whatever they want to put it, depending on how crude they are. So I agree with that, and I think, as I said, that it's the ones who are lower down in the intellectual, spectrum or whatever, because they're kind of thinking, I don't want somebody smarter than me, and so whereas a really intelligent man, it wants somebody who's as smart as him, which can be an intelligent woman, or maybe even one who's smarter, in which case they're like, hey, I'm being challenged by this person. And so, yeah, I agree that that's not all men. And, I mean, just like with anything else, you're talking about has Stepford wife become a negative term. Well, to the people who use it, they use it as a negative term. But, yeah, for sure, there's people who never would think to call it that because that's just what they want or what they have.
Well, and further, though, here's the question. Or a question anyway, if this movie posits a universe where women don't want to do this shit anymore, and so they have to be murdered and replaced with replicas that do. But, yeah, I mean, if you were one of these guys and you could find a beautiful woman who wanted to be a docile slave to you, and that was what the two of you wanted, hey, rock on. I am a complete relativist. If that's what you two want to do and you're consenting home, fine. But I think the thing that's going on here is that this movie is suggesting there's not enough of those women to go around. Oh, what is it, Joy?
It's not consenting.
Right.
Being killed.
In this one, there's just not enough of them, and so we have to start killing women in order to keep what we want. And this says, in the tradition of bad guys everywhere, that it's about power. If the day were to come where the women were capable of doing it, he fully expects that they would start murdering the men and replacing them with robots.
And Diz is a very chilling villain for how little they are. The last scene in this movie where he's literally luring her by just strategically locking doors down to this basement layer where the automaton version of her is an incredibly chilling scene. And the actor who plays Diz just plays it with this. And it's funny, we're talking about how only an intellectual, somebody who's intellectually minuscule could possibly want a wife like this. However, Diz is obviously a genius. He's an evil genius.
Yeah, but Diz is not. He is not doing this because he wants a wife like this. He's doing it because he gets to single-handedly create a society ruled by men.
True.
I mean, he is.
It's
all
true.
About
He doesn't actually have a wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember if he does. I guess he does.
No, they call him a bachelor, and he's got like the Hugh Hefner pad.
Yeah. Well, the thing when he goes over and he says, "I like to watch women do little domestic tasks," which does sound like a sexual fetish, but it's also, when you think about it, it's just him being an engineer. He's just walking in and he's going to study the way that she makes coffee and does whatever.
Yeah, he didn't mean that. Yeah, they were just studying her to.
But I mean, I think he's always, if you took the humanity out of it, it is fascinating how they pulled this off. We could get into some of the practicalities.
Yeah, the robots are, way better than anything that exists even now, let alone, in the mid-70s.
Is there, but before we go into some of these practical questions, is there anything else in the philosophy of Stepford Wives that anybody would like to touch on that I didn't think of or that we didn't think of? And if...
No.
Oh, okay, all right. And if more turns up, we're going to be doing several weeks of Stepfordisms, so we can go back here. And I have a feeling that we're going to go from the sublime to the ridiculous, because we're going to cover some pretty terrible and forgotten Stepford sequels. But which is funny, actually, when you think about the fact that the whole idea of the Stepford Wives is about a weak copy, and then we're going to watch several sequels of the Stepford Wives.
Weak copies of it. Yeah.
So, all right. I just want to remark on the amazing way that these guys conspire to build a replacement wife, and I guess they do it every time. Yeah. We see it with Catherine Ross, but presumably they did it with Tina Louise.
Quickly, they do it very quickly.
So
in a couple of months.
The voice guy, he gets you rather brilliantly to recite.
The guy with the stutter.
Who's supposedly a studier of accents and everything, has a tape recorder, and he has you...
He's a cunning linguist.
Yeah, yes, very good.
Zoinks!
You have to read a whole bunch of words so that he has a full vocabulary to give your robot in your voice. So he's going to put together the audio part of this audio animatronic that he's building. And you've got the artist guy who draws a number of different images of you. And this is like a guy straight out of Playboy magazine. Like, apparently he's a famous artist. And then they've got presumably a sculptor who's making the body.
That's what it is, I think.
Yeah, but this is what I don't know is I don't get. I think Adam pointed it out. She has black eyes. When they introduce her first copy, or her copy that actually murders her, it seems to be an unfinished, maybe
he says we didn't quite get yours finished because we had to go faster because you caught on to us.
Yeah.
And so, but I don't know I'm curious if the black eyes are always there and they just replace the eyes of the imposter with
the eyes are the windows of the soul.
Ew.
Yeah.
And they even in the movie on a big close up of her eyes. But
that's true.
The thing that I'm confused about, and Diz even says, like, don't think of it as, she noticed she has this fireplace poker, and that obviously she could, club him to death with it, very easily actually.
Yeah.
But he kind of like tries to reassure her that she's not, almost like that she's not dying. She's just entering. He says, "You're entering a new stage."
Yeah, it's perfect for us, and it's perfect for you. And we're like, how?
Yeah, it's perfect for you. So what? And again, this is all very vague. But are these robots? Are these cyborgs? Like, do they keep like parts of the quote unquote original? Like, is that why they have no eyes? Do they keep like the brains and the eyes and plug in the necessary
they wouldn't keep
parts?
the brain. For sure, they don't keep the brain because that's where that would be. Then they have all the words and they have their own.
If they can do all this, one would assume that they could, reprogram or brainwash. So,
then they would just use the real people. No, I'm pretty sure the brain is fake for sure. But the eyes, I don't know if they are or not. But when she's holding the poker, I've been in a situation where I just did not behave with my rational mind because I was just so stunned by what was going on. I was like, what's happening here? And just completely didn't even, call on any of my own resources or strengths or anything.
It's not her reaction that really makes me, question this. It's what he's saying. It's what he's saying. So I'm just saying that it makes sense that she's just kind of not going to give over to it. It doesn't matter what he says because he's just going to give him. She's just kind of like I don't know what to do here, so she's just kind of stunned. And then she sort of wakes up and runs away. But by then he already has the thing. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right that he's trying to tell her that this is good for her. It's like as if he's trying to convince himself that somehow he's not super. Well, and he admires aspects of her. He says that she's a good mother and that she's more intelligent than his other subjects and that she's a good subject. And obviously, when you get to see these Stepford wives, they do behave in almost like a brainwashed fashion, but there still seems aspects, at least small aspects nonetheless, of the original personality in there. So,
the one wife keeps talking about, she apologizes for malfunctioning after the car accident at the pool party. And,
oh my God. Boy, that hurts my feelings to think about that.
But she keeps bringing up her alcoholism. So it's is that something that, would she be programmed to remember alcohol? Yeah, she's programmed to still remember her mistakes as well.
Right. Yeah, they're programmed well. Because remember, he's asking her, all the places she's lived and all that. So they program them with the basic memories that they have, and so that they can, have conversations about it.
I don't know. The only real way I have to think of them as cyborgs. I can't think of them as robots. I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense to me other ways. And again, it's all kept very vague. I
don't know why it doesn't. That's you say cyborgs. I think of just like I said, the animatronic things and the rides in Disney World.
Well, that's the base. That's the basis. I mean, come on. These are obviously way more sophisticated than an animatronic dummy. I mean,
yeah.
And he left there and formed his own company where he's making these amazing, truly amazing cyborg. Which is funny. By the way, it's funny that you can make these things. You can make this, right? And what are you doing it for? You're not even making money off of it.
You're making sex bots for a bunch of middle-aged men in Connecticut
who live down the block from you. I mean, he could be selling these things into prostitution. He could be.
The military would want these.
Absolutely, this is the super soldier. He could be dropping these things into Vietnam. We don't have to lose Saigon because of the Stepford wives. But no, he's only interested.
This is the most epic fan fiction that has never happened. It's all on you, Jason.
So I don't know. It is interesting. But all right. So I'm looking through my notes to try to think of other practical things that were actually really odd. Like we said, we don't know how early the husband is involved because when the husband sneaks out to the curb and talks to Mr. Van Zandt and says, yeah, like you said, Drew, he goes, she cooks as good as she looks. There's a sneakiness to them that suggests that maybe before the husband even moved to this town, he knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, it's possible, but gosh, that sure makes him sinister. Whereas, because when he finds out, when he comes back from the thing and he's like, oh, there's a condition that I don't know if I'm comfortable with, he seems pretty shaken up. So I don't think he quite gets it. I think he might have known that the town, that the women were kind of.
These guys, though, because eventually they are going to run across the guy that really loves his wife. And he's going to go.
That guy is probably going to end up dead. That guy's going to end up dead.
Straw dogs on the whole town.
Yeah, I think this guy is just lurid and stupid. It's just sort of like I think even though she said, "Look, well, I don't know why you're asking me because when I said talked about moving, you were already looking for a house. When you talked about this house, you already made a down payment. So yeah, he obviously had some sort of dealings, and he was obviously drawn here, and obviously this reveals some sort of a problem already in the relationship and kind of like the kind of guy he is because he did all this stuff. Perhaps without even the knowledge of the secret of Stepford. That may have been something, but it may have just been like, he met Diz, and that might have been it. But
I think it's society again. It's society's effect on him. It's the idea of, he's been living in the city all this time. Well, now it's time to go be in the suburbs and have good, wholesome American values in the suburbs. I'm going to move to this nice, lovely place where, the women look lovely and the men are real men.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he even says as much. He says that's why we're moving to Stepford.
Yes. And many people would agree. I mean, many people look. I live in the suburbs. I don't live downtown in the loft apartments where everything's hip and happening. I mean, there's a reason why we live out here, and most of it's pretty boring. And,
for us it has to do with raising kids, but that's the other thing. So in this community, and again, we're going to watch Stepford Children, but in this community, the idea is that we want our kids to look and behave a certain way too. And I actually wonder, we're talking about the practical thing, what happens because I don't know what's going on with the kids. I honestly don't remember the Stepford Children.
The kids look like the kids from Village of the Damned to me.
Yeah, they really do.
So I will find out next time as far as what actually happens to them. But what I'm wondering
is... next week is the Revenge of the Stepford Wives.
Whatever. But the point is, whenever we do Stepford Kids, we'll find out. And but I'm wondering if, if the mom comes back this way, like this weird way, the kids are going to know. The kids aren't stupid. They're not going to be like... my kid... If I walk in the room and I'm in a different mood, she's like, "What's going on? Why are you acting this way? What's wrong?" So kids aren't idiots, so they're going to know. And so I'm really curious, just as far as a practical matter, it's how they handle that do they? Because I can't imagine that they're dealing with the kids in the Stepford way, like switching them out or brainwashing or whatever, at the same time as the wife. I don't think that's happening.
But I'm glad you guys pointed this out because I did not notice. I noticed the Stepford kids, but by the time we saw the kids of the living moms being rambunctious and everything, I had totally forgotten. So thank you for pointing it out because, they. I think it's possible that once their moms are replaced by robots, they sense that and get depressed and become Village of the Damned's children. I mean, I think that's the way I read it. But I don't know. I mean, what's up with the dog, for that matter?
Well, the dog. I think they kidnapped the dog and put him with the imposter so that he gets used to the imposter. I don't think it's a robot dog. I think they're just getting the dog acclimated to this new person, so it's not going to hurt.
That's interesting.
I think that's part of the programming. They had made that room up to look exactly like her room. And, also obviously, and there's this very ceremonial aspect of it, is that we're going to lure the original down to this replica of their bedroom, and the mechanical replacement is going to strangle you to death.
And then what do they do with the body?
I guess that to me they must use the body for the fill in the parts they can't mechanically replicate. It's the which is gruesome to think about, but this whole thing is ghastly business to begin with.
Maybe, but I don't know about that. I think they just destroyed them. I think they just have a incinerator or something.
I kind of think they just ditched the body.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got this. Look, the whole town appears to be. Well, the police appear to be compromised, and that's because the Men's Association, rather like the Rotary Club, has somebody who's part of every organization. So they've got cops. The cops are definitely in cahoots with the Men's Association.
Cops want Stepford Wives too, Jason.
Apparently they do. Yeah, and so they got the cops. The old ladies aren't aware of it, and that's what's hilarious.
I wonder if they are or if they're not. I was really curious about that, actually.
No, I don't know. That one lady.
We only really ever see the one old lady.
Yes.
And it could be that she knows things have changed, but she doesn't seem to think. she doesn't seem to realize that there's anything sinister going on.
Yeah, no, you're right. She has thinks that, the town had a certain amount of liberalism, and that's kind of cool, and it's kind of gone away now, and that's cool. I mean, she literally...
I love how she's like, there's a black couple moving into town. Do you think that's good? I think that's good.
So, yeah, no, that was really funny. Well, and we see at the end that the black couple, if I recall, has also been... No, you're right. They're fighting. So she has not been robotized yet.
No, they're fighting in the grocery store. So things are already starting to go down the hill. Yeah. Don't go to Stepford. That's the message. Is that no matter how upwardly mobile you become, you should stay away from this kind of New England suburb. This is, by the way, really shot in New England, and it's just gorgeous for all that. I wanted to mention,
Jamie, did this make you nostalgic for home, the way it looked?
Yeah, it did. Like, it did remind me a lot of home in a lot of ways.
You mean like in terms of the streets or the house, the way the houses look, or
the way, like, all of it, like the weather that they show, like the way certain houses looked, the trees going down the street and things along those lines. It's just like, I wouldn't say I grew up in suburbia, because I grew up in Kingston, New York, which is a city, but it's still not like a city like New York City. It's would probably be more considered more along the Stepford lines, I guess, but it's still pretty diverse. But I just the way everything, like I said, the scenery.
Yeah, it is beautiful, and I think the sequels will be shot largely in California. You can really tell the difference. I mean, you really do believe that these are some people who have moved out into the burbs.
Connecticut, like it does really look like Connecticut.
Oh yeah. No, it is so gorgeous and old, and I love the supermarket. I mean, I think if you were a young, like yourself, Jamie, actually, if you're a young person watching this movie, the world that they're showing in many ways is alien to ours. I mean, like that.
Oh yes, oddly quaint.
Yes, good point. You could go to a town today that's deliberately the way this town is, because they want you to feel like
move there.
I mean, they got this groovy little grocery store where the parking lot's so small that nobody can coordinate their giant station wagons through it, and which is such a hilarious detail. I don't even know if this is a normal thing where everybody's trying to park their Pontiac station wagons and they need some kid to be out there directing traffic. Because
it could be that the robots haven't been well programmed to drive.
I would think the robots would be better at this.
Then who exactly?
Not in the 1970s.
Yeah. No, that's. I mean, we want self-driving cars now. We're all hoping that Google can figure out how to replace our vehicles with robot cars.
Yeah, but
that's an interesting point. Like a third point, it's the relationship with technology. Which has obviously progressed a lot.
We want Stepford cars now.
We want something. We want a machine that can raise our kids, so we can go off and focus on career. Yeah. You kind of wonder where we're going when they're talking about machines that will now drive for you, and the slow dissolution, like more and more of the responsibility of actually doing things is being taken away from us.
I mean, take it, man. I would love to have a machine to drive for me.
Well, but we have all these movies now that comment on that. It's like I, Robot and Terminator.
WALL-E.
And, what's that? WALL-E. Yeah. It's like all these movies that talk about like, what's the world going to be like once we've managed to automate everything? Are the robots going to take over? Are we just going to be like, wasting away? What's it going to be? And this is one of those comments. Like,
I'm telling you, in this retrospective, we're going to do she. We're going to wind up with she.
Her.
Is it called her?
Yeah, her.
She, her.
Well, I mean, the threads that this movie put out, like tons of other movies picked up on it. Obviously, stuff that like disturbing behavior, which is essentially the Stepford teenagers Then you have, the Terminator, or even something that is seemingly unrelated as Hot Fuzz has a lot of this movie in it.
Right, Blade Runner to a certain degree.
Yeah.
No, that's true. That's a really good point. It's a really good point. All right, we should probably move over to our final thoughts and then get recommendations if we have them. Because we could probably keep going about Stepford Wives for another 2 hours. But, okay. What order we go? We started with Jamie, right? So, Jamie, lay it on us. Anything that you want to talk about that we may not have touched on or anything else. And, of course, we'll be around for several more shows. Final thoughts on the Stepford Wives.
I'd say if you've got some time and, you should go out and watch it. It's just enough for just a good discussion piece and see, how you feel about yourself in the ways of how we treat gender conformity and gender norms and gender roles and just the idea of gender in society from now versus what once was, and how different things are and how some things are still really the same. Yeah.
Very good, very good. Let's see, did I have Adam? Adam, what are your final thoughts?
All right, Jimmy put it really well. In addition, I think not a lot of movies actually from the 1970s age particularly well, but I think because of the look and the feel, and really where it is in time, it actually helps this movie. And if you look at it in the context of where we were in the 1970s, I think that continues to reinforce the message. I think it still holds up because of this. Often you try and think of movies that are out of time in some way. You try to think of it in modern times. This actually works really well back then. To think of sort of back then and then to use it to sort of reflect on where you are now. And it's also, in addition, let's face it, also really entertaining. And it is horrific in its own way. So it does really sort of work, in this retrospective, in this podcast. So I think it's a great movie, and it's one that I'm glad I got to see again.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julia. What are your thoughts?
Don't watch this movie if you're having marital difficulties.
That's true of a lot of the movies.
I know, right? Seriously, it's like you're watching this, and I'm sure glad that I don't fear that my husband secretly desires to kill me and replace me with a robot right now. There are times when I might have thought differently, but right now I don't feel that way. So that's a good thing. No, I like this. I'm really glad that we did it, and I've just really enjoyed this conversation. I'm so glad that all of you could be with us.
Wow. No. Okay. Drew, final thoughts. Stepford Wives.
Well, I want to say, just throw in as an aside, I think it's very appropriate that we're diving into this subject shortly after the passing of David Bowie, who dropped an atom bomb on the idea of traditional masculinity back in the 70s. So, R.I.P. David Bowie.
Yeah.
But, this is...
and Alan Rickman.
And Alan Rickman. And pretty much death seems to be the in thing among the rich and famous lately. So we could really...
the threes, so hopefully that's it. I think with Glenn...
I think we're in the nines now. We had Lemmy, we had Angus Scrimm. Yesterday, one of the Eagles died, and one of Crosby, Stills, and Nash. We're getting... I think earlier today I read that the drummer from Rollins Band just died. So people are, especially rock stars, they're dropping like flies. But Stepford Wives, this is a great movie. I think this is going to make for an interesting discussion as we continue on with this subject, with the obviously lesser incarnations of this, but it's a subject that's ripe for philosophical discussion. So I think I enjoyed this discussion quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to the weeks to come.
Me too. Okay, I have almost nothing to add to that other than that These were really fantastic. Actually, I will add this. We watched this with our girls, who are 10 and 14, and they were transfixed by it. I mean, they really loved it, and you know, constantly were having observations about it and trying to figure out what was going to happen. And the 14-year-old said, "Well, this is a utopia." And I said, "What are you talking about? This is a dystopia." And she said, "Well, every dystopia is somebody's utopia." And then I thought, wow, my mind is blown. Wow.
Yeah.
So, yes. So I was
yes,
very
our
happy.
children are both officially smarter than we are.
And they know it, too.
Yeah.
Okay. So
would you say
you
they're
know what?
better replacements for you?
They are, actually. We are, and at this point, with only 2 of them, we are at exact replacement, basically. So, yes, which is just as well. So we should do endorsements if we have anything, and if you don't have anything, it's totally fine. But let's go. Jamie, do you have anything to endorse this week?
I'm trying to remember what I endorsed my last time on here, but I think I'd like to endorse my the last book I just read, Carrie Brownstein's Hunger Makes Me a Modern Girl, talking about shout out to the Riot Girls of way back when, but Carrie Brownstein of Slater-Kinney fame, as well as one of my favorite shows, Portlandia, talks about everything you want to know about Slater-Kinney. And I was a little disappointed. Drew keeps telling me that's not what memoirs are for. I wanted to know how her and Fred Armisen came to do Portlandia, and there's only like a little blurb about it at the end of the book. But other than that, I thought it was a really good read. I was a little disappointed that she didn't talk about that, but okay. But other than that, I really liked her view on things about, being a woman in a male-dominated society, music industry, or the industry, the film industry, and, then still going about and doing what she wanted to do. So, yeah, that's my endorsement for the week.
No, that's delightful. Adam, did you have anything to endorse this week?
For those who haven't seen it, and for those who have seen it, Bridge of Spies. It's with Tom Hanks.
Sure.
Yeah. It's quite good, and it's another. Even though it's made, obviously it's modern. It's made now, but it really does. It's interesting how it sort of captures a time as well. It's remarkably good, and I think Hanks is always sort of eminently watchable. But also it captures this really great sort of time, Cold War. Soviet Union and sort of everything else, and it's very interesting. Yeah,
is it the Gary Powers story? Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's very interesting. It's nicely made. It's entertaining while also being kind of good character study, thought provoking. Very 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 interesting. You sort of think you sort of know how it's going to all sort of play out, and actually it does a really good job of making it. Continuing to keep it sort of fresh and interesting. So I liked it a lot.
Does I know that it's told from the perspective of the negotiator, but does Powers actually appear as a character in the movie, or?
Yes, he does appear.
Very cool. That sounds fun. I mean, the Bionic Man played him in a movie like 30 years.
Oh, sure, years ago.
Yeah.
Lee Majors.
That's right, Lee Majors. Yes. I'm sorry. How can I forget the name Lee Majors, for Pete's sake? Okay. Very cool. So, who's next? Julia, did you have anything to endorse for us this week?
I'm going to endorse something very unusual. I actually went to an open house at the Denver Islamic Society this weekend, like this. It's a Muslim mosque, and I just thought it was fascinating. I really knew very little about Islam or about Muslims. And so to me, having that opportunity, them opening their doors and answering questions and giving us awesome food and just getting to see, what it's like and watch prayer and everything, it was just really interesting and enlightening. I mean, there's just so much I didn't know, and I really just highly recommend to anybody who has the opportunity to visit a mosque or to learn more about Islam. It's just I really recommend it because I blew all of my assumptions and thoughts out of the water as far as for me it was specifically about women, more about women. I never have been one of those people who assumes that terrorism has anything to do with being Muslim because there's just as many Christian terrorists as there are Muslim terrorists. So that was not my thing. But I had a lot of preconceived notions about how they treat women and how just a lot of things. And so I just really and the fact that they believe in Jesus having had a virgin birth and they call him the Messiah and all that. I mean, there was all this stuff that I was like, what? Like, what? Anyway, so I highly recommend just becoming better informed about Islam and about other cultures that aren't yours.
Wow.
That's my weird endorsement this week.
Always rely on Julia to guarantee that we get letters.
What?
Drew.
When have we ever gotten letters because of me? Maybe you keep them from me.
No.
Have we ever gotten letters?
I think he means comments.
We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
Stacks and stacks of letters. Yeah. Okay.
I
And
think
now you're
most
going
of our
back to. Go ahead.
Our feedback is by and large positive. I would say.
I'm teasing. My God, now I feel profoundly ashamed. Drew.
You should,
You should
sir.
feel ashamed.
I feel bad following Julia with her very selfless and eye-opening endorsement because mine's completely selfish. I am endorsing fan service on Fanboy TV. I was on there. It is a local cable access show. It is dedicated to geek and nerd culture, and they've been doing Geek Obsession Month. And I was pulled on there last week for their episode called Undead Love, which was all about vampires, zombies, the paranormal, ghosts, what have you. And I was deemed the local celebrity, local celebrity most worthy of talking about the subject of these things. And I had a good time talking about it with them. And, you know, we touched on everything from the TV show Supernatural, The Walking Dead, Twilight, vampire movies. We talked a lot about Dracula. I got a little saucy at one point, much to Jamie's amusement. But it's up on their website now. It's fanboytv.com, and it's going to be up on YouTube later on. And please check it out. I did post a link to that on our Castle Horror Facebook page. Just want to go that route.
Yes, and it's cool. I've seen half of it already, and it's really neat. So that was cool. I love the way they do the show. I mean, I love that they're it's very simple, and I love how they're lined up. It sets my brain like just turning as to the vast possibilities in life. It was really neat, and congratulations, you carried yourself very well.
I was at least very well dressed.
I have never in my life seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But tomorrow night it's going to be showing around the country in big theaters.
Yep.
And so I'm going to go watch it. I'm very excited about that.
Nice.
It is a Fathom event. So that's
it
what
the anniversary of?
I don't even know what the purpose is. It's January 20th. It's a good question. It might have something to do with the anniversary or something. But yeah, January 20th around the country. Fathom events, different theaters are playing Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Isn't that today? Isn't today the 20th?
No, today is the 19th. Tomorrow's 20th. Oh. So, yes. So this is tomorrow night.
Okay.
Honey, I'm going to a movie tomorrow night, just so you know. And, yes. So, I will, and that also was written by William Goldman and also stars Catherine Ross, the star of tonight's film. So, and eventually on this show, we are going to do The Legacy, which I know Adam is
a great movie.
Oh, so good. And it also stars Catherine Ross. Yeah, fantastic film. But we'll get there eventually. Okay. That takes us to the end of the endorsements. That takes us to the end of our first show in the STEPFORD WIVES retrospective. I am so excited that we've started this. For those of you listening, thank you so much. Please join us on the Facebook page. Throw new theories at us, new questions. We will totally engage with you. We want to hear your thoughts, and we would love it if you would leave us reviews on iTunes, because that's really helpful. It helps people find the show. And if you have friends who've never listened to the show, grab them, drag them into your house, and sit them down and force them to stay there and tie them up if you need to.
No, we don't. No,
and then
we don't
start
advocate
playing the show for them and force them to wear headphones until as they listen to it.
We advocate strongly encouraging, not kidnapping and tying up.
My fantasy is a legitimate fantasy.
Oh, I see.
You're lucky you're married to a lawyer, Jason.
I was thinking of a different kind of friend. I didn't understand there was that kind of friend.
The hilarious thing is that that's what you would choose to do, is force them to listen to your podcast.
Well,
that's actually, you just described the best comedy bit I've ever heard of. That this guy is very sensuous and cool and gets you into his house and then forces you to listen to his podcast on horror movies. That sounds like something that would happen on Broad City. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a fantastic week. Thanks, guys, for being on. And I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks.